afternoon, friends.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
We extend a very warm welcome to all present to this seminar being organized by the Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, to celebrate the occasion of International Women's Day and also the Foundation Day of the Women's Studies Center. The Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, began its journey on this day in the year 2010. I would now request our esteemed principal, Professor Dr. Shuli Shorkar, to please say a few words and inaugurate today's session. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Mona Lisa. Respected Professor Vibhuti Patel, our honorable speaker today, respected Dr. Parna Ghosh and Srimati Mohua Rai, Joint Coordinators, Women's Studies Center of Lady Brabourne College, eminent guests and dignitaries, my esteemed colleagues, and our beloved students. A very good afternoon to you all. It's a wonderful occasion when the Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, like every year, has organized a program to celebrate the International Women's Day on this day, but today being a holiday, that is the day of Holi, we have arranged a national level webinar, and the webinar is being started now. International Women's Day is celebrated annually on March 8th to commemorate the economic, social, political, and cultural achievements and all-round activities of women all over the world. The principal aim of the celebration of this day is to bring attention not only for women, but for every individual to a number of women-related issues like gender equality, women's right to reproduction, crime and violence against women, etc. In several countries, International Women's Day is a public holiday. In some others, like India, it is observed socially or locally. Lady Brabourne College, being basically an all-women's college, we observe this very special day in our college by organizing various seminars or webinars on quite a few women-related issues, and also by organizing some gender awareness programs. The initiative has always been taken by the Women's Studies Center of Lady Brabourne College since its inception in the year 2010. On 28 February 1909, the day exclusively for women was originally observed in New York City as the National Women's Day. On the advice of Teresa Malkiel, a well-known social activist, the Socialist Party of America took the initiative in observing the day. On 8 March 1917, women laborers in cotton mills of Petrograd launched a mass movement to demand food and peace and to stop World War I immediately. Within 7 days of the day, the Russian Tsar Nicholas II granted women's right to vote. From that time, the day 8 March began to be observed with care in socialist states like Soviet Union, China, and others. Since 1967, in quite a few countries of Europe, 8th of March was observed as a Women's International Day of Struggle. Since 1975, United Nations recognized the day 8th of March as the International Women's Day. I'm not going to linger my speech anymore. We are all eagerly waiting to hear from Professor Vibhuti Patel today, our honorable resource person on climate change and women. I wish today's program a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. We have indeed been very fortunate in having the support and guidance of our principal in all the activities of the Women's Studies Center, which the center undertakes. And over the years, we have been successful in these endeavors with the support that Madam has always provided us. I would now request Madam Principal and Dr. Porna Ghosh, Coordinator of the Women's Studies Center and Associate Professor of English, to please release the Journal of the Women's Studies Center on screen, which is an ISSN peer-reviewed journal published annually by the center. Please, Madam. Yes, this is the newsletter which is being published since 2012, and this is the 13th volume of this newsletter being published this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Madam, and thank you, Pranadi, and thank you, Dr. Patel. Our honored speaker today is Professor Vibhuti Patel, Vice President, Indian Association for Women's Studies, and retired professor of the Advanced Center for Women's Studies, School of Development Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Since the last 4 decades, Professor Patel's work has focused on issues of intersectionality, where gender development and social justice meet. She has authored and edited several books and presented papers in several national and international workshops and conferences in various parts of India and abroad. Her areas of interest include gender economics, women's studies, human rights, social movements, and gender budgeting. The title of Professor Patel's talk today is Gender and Climate Change. I would now request you, Madam, to please begin your lecture. Thank you.
So, yeah, very good afternoon to one and all. And first of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Professor Sanjukta Sarkar, who has been in touch with me for last 6 weeks, Dr. Monali Sadda and Dr. Parna Ghosh for making me part of today's historic event, which is a Foundation Day of Women's Studies Center, and also the release of your journal. And the most important of all is the International Women's Day that we are commemorating. Principal Madam has already told you about the glorious history of sisterhood, strength, and solidarity that this day symbolizes. And every year we take the stock of situation and try to address the concerns of women in unfolding reality. In the recent times, the major discourses are happening around climate change and how it is impacting lives of women. When the first time report of climate change was submitted in the UN, there was no mention of word women. And it was only after the UN cry made by the women's organizations in 191 countries that we managed to get the gender concerns being included. And over last 22 years, we have seen that so many climate crises have happened in different parts of the world, and women have put up brave front and they have shown their resilience. So today's talk of mine is gender equality, climate change, and sustainable development goals. We all know that there are 17 sustainable development goals in which so many goals also directly are linked to climate change, whether it is a question of food security, because if there is a flood and if there is drought, that also affects your supply of grain and food and vegetables and fruits, whether it is a question of health and well-being, so many vector-borne diseases, they are linked to climate crisis. When there is a climate crisis, education also gets jeopardized. So it cuts across all 17 goals. That's why it is very important in the Sustainable Development Goal, even when India took the presidency of G20 countries, climate change and the response and resilience to climate change involving women into climate change discourse became a very important concern. What we see is that which are the canonical gender concerns that we have, that existing multidimensional vulnerabilities that women have whenever any disaster takes place, no? So climatic disasters also result in physical, economic, social, ecological, educational, organizational, political, and even motivational crisis. Because when you see the disaster and destruction all around, you also lose your interest in life, no? Intersectional, existential, this social of women that impact women of various marginalized communities who live in a extremely fragile economic and social situation, environmentally fragile land. There is so much written about what happens to women farmers in Sundarban region in Bengal. Okay, social code structures and systemic barriers that also create more vulnerabilities. The gender stereotypes that we have, the very extremely rigid patriarchal structures, some of the systemic barriers that we are facing that also create more vulnerability to women, both at the time of crisis, because women are not given, like when tsunami happened, men could save themselves because right from their childhood they were taught swimming while women were not. Men were wearing half pant or full pant. They could easily swim in the water while women were very sari. So many times when the tsunami waves came, sari themselves became women's killer because they got entangled. No, so this kind of differential impact of climate change that I think we need to note. A disaster resilience and relief must be cognizant of the post-disaster interventions, because we see that most of the time in the post-disaster intervention, man is kept as a unit of analysis for all the kind of, whether it is a question of generation of employment or the organization of refugee camps or the preparation of relief kit, even in the at the time of tsunami or Katrina or so many other disasters, when the relief kit is made, there is nothing for women. None of the women's undergarments are not there in the relief kit. There are no menstrual pad for women in this. So this kind of a special needs of women, they need to be kept into consideration. Women sit on foundation of a bleak picture and the monumental suffering that any kind of climatic disaster causes. I think about that increasing sensitivity has happened now because of the research is done by the women's studies scholars and the social workers who are working at a ground level. Discourse on sustainable development, which where we start with the normative definition of sustainable development that meets the needs of and aspirations of the current generation without compromising the ability to meet those of future generations. So we need to curtail the consumerist culture. If we can't use all the natural resources to such an extent that we don't leave anything for our children and grandchildren and the future generations. Human development approach towards sustainable development is that which enables individuals and communities in developing countries to raise living standards through just and fair trade, non-exploitative product pricing, and production processes which are consistent with minimizing adverse environmental effect. That means the kind of industrial model of industry that you use, or if it generates too much of a environmental imbalance, then also it is going to create so much of problem. For industrialized country, anything which is problematic is transferred to the developing country, and now the developing countries are becoming more conscious of the environmental effect of certain kind of industries which are dumped on us. The whole discourse is about growth versus development. Do we just want to increase growth rate without any human development investment? If this kind of growth, which makes people miserable, which creates unemployment, which doesn't allow people to have a quality education or food security, what is the use of that growth? No, only if 1% of the population benefits of this growth model and the rest are left out. So Agenda 13 of the climate change urges to take action to combat climate change and its impact. Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent. It is disrupting national economies, affecting lives, costing peoples and communities and countries dearly today and even more tomorrow, whether it is a floods or drought or sandstorm or earthquake. Recently what's happening in Turkey and Syria. So vision of sustainable development goal, the overarching concern is human well-being, intergenerational justice through economic growth, ecological sustainability, empowerment of the marginalized, and people's participation in decision making. If you are talking about the development of Sundarban, women and people in that region, they are the ones who know what are the climatic concerns. So with bypassing them, you can't come up with a top-down policy or top-down programs. Deeper structural parameters such as ownership of resources, cultural, whether they are forest resources or land resources, agricultural resources, cultural values of the people, because it is not just moving furniture, no? They are human beings, they are habitat, they have the cultural values, they have that very strong relationship with the land, with the forest, with the region, with the the kind of lifestyle which they have because of they grew up in certain geographic location. Mode of production and growth trajectory, all of them, they need to be in harmony. Intertemporal individual freedoms, very important, and interpersonal individual freedoms are also extremely important. Gender equality and gender justice are very important concern. Equality based on caste, ethnicity, class, any kind of inequality and intersectional vulnerabilities which are there because of caste, ethnicity, class, gender, which becomes the major cause of environmental crisis. Who depletes forest resources? Every time our forest law, they criminalize tribal women, and any time a tribal woman takes a dry wood, she is labeled as a thief. She's beaten up. People get brutalized. They are imprisoned. They are raped. And but nobody acknowledges that these are the same tribal women who are also planting trees. They have lived for generations together in those forest areas. So when you don't have cooking fuel, any other, so what's wrong if they take some dried wood? But you don't control timber mafia. Why did Chipko movement start in 1972? Women in Tehri Garhwal, Gaura Devi and others, they started Chipko movement because timber mafia was arbitrarily felling trees. They were denuding Himalaya, and they had created major ecological disasters which resulted in landslides where villages after villages were submerged, crops were destroyed, rainfall had dropped, water tables in the streams and rivers and tributaries had gone down. Women had to wander from one hill to the other hill to get one pitcher of water, and if they did not get water or fuel or fodder or forest fruits, they would jump from the hilltop and commit suicide. So even suicide rates increased. The same timber mafia which was rounding up their men to fell the trees on a daily wage basis, they were the same people who were also running the alcohol den and alcohol business. So with one hand, they would give them daily wage, and in the other hand, they would take that money for alcohol, bottle of alcohol, and which also created indebtedness among this man who sold off their young daughters to the traffickers. One such wrong way of dealing with the people's resources or the natural resources resulted in so many multifaceted crises for the community. And this women finally approached Gandhian leader Sundarlal Bahuguna, who started a campaign against the felling of arbitrary felling of trees and deforestation in Himalayan region. So that was way back in 1972. And now we see that after whatever predictions women from Tehreek Arwal had made in 72, they after say 50 years, where all their predictions have come true. Every year we are getting disaster. What is happening currently in the Himalayan valleys? So many cracks are seen in Joshipura village. There are people who will be dehoused. They are getting floods even in summer, and landslides are happening so often. When it comes to the forest land, and I think tribal communities have always been up in arms against the state because of the draconian forest laws, and they say they don't take forest land, fertile land and tribal land. Whatever economic development you want to do it on a very infertile or a dry land. Don't mess up our food security and food sovereignty. Pillars of sustainable development in the economic field are skill and employment, livelihood, socially responsible corporate governance, and ethical investing. When it comes to the social field, we need to educate, health, and make people know their entitlements. It's very important that you have a right to food, right to education, right to dignity, right to justice, right to employment. And when it comes to environmental concerns, reduction in carbon footprints and coping with climate change become very important. So we had a conference in Rio. Now we are Rio plus 20 conference on sustainable development. Developing countries versus industrialized countries, there are a lot of debates and polemics going on. Developing countries always are blamed by the rich countries for population, that they have a very, their population is responsible for carbon footprint or global warming, as against their developing countries are blaming industrialized countries for their consumerist lifestyle. And there are so many statistical exercises have been done by organizations like Center for Science and Environment, which says that on an average, one American child consumes 200 times more resources than a Bangladeshi child. So one American child's consumption is equivalent to 200 Bangladeshi children's consumption. So don't blame poor countries. The major fault line lies with the rich countries who are following the use and throw policy. No, it is the capitalist, with the whole industrial capitalism, which sees this kind of a consumerism, which dumps unnecessary products and very hazardous production processes, which are creating global warming. And there are a lot of debates going on currently among the scientists, environmentalists, engineers, and social scientists. The question of vast renewable energy potential could help in responding to this scenario, provided policy and financial measures quickly scale up proven technologies for the poor, including small hydro and solar power. I think there are so many scientists have said that we should have a smaller projects like hydro projects and solar projects, because they would have a less devastating impact. Rainwater harvesting, decentralized water bodies, recycling and reusing the resources, that's very important. And I think it is said that in India, none of the waste material, especially the solid waste material, is wasted. So many, at every stage recycling. The one study of Mumbai city says Mumbai comes up with the highest amount of recyclable material. The dumping is much, much higher by the kind of lifestyle Mumbaikar has. But at every stage, right from the point of view of the collection at the housing society to the collection which is sold to the kabadiwalas, means the recycling agents, and after that when it is also further recycled by the workers, almost all types of solid waste, whether it is a plastic or paper or a glass or metal, everything gets reused. Gender concerns in climate change, when we talk about, it is very important to understand that women in most of the developing countries of Asia, Africa, Latin America are responsible for climatically sensitive tasks such as securing food, collection of water, energy, which ensure well-being of a household, because they have to depend on the natural resources. The effect of climate change, such as droughts or floods or coastal erosion, sea level rising, rising temperatures, it puts greater pressure on women to shoulder the adverse consequences of households. You know, UN Women has made a very good film on that, which is called Other Half, where which it is it is in the context of gender responsive budgeting. But there, the case study of Sundarban shows that how women are coping up with the climate change, and what kind of gender responsive budgeting, where the allocation of funds, functions and functionaries is made, if it is made in a gender responsive way in collaboration with Ministry of Science and Technology, we can save so many lives, and we can also give them more secure and better quality of life. So the learnings of the women's color protest during the 70s, right from Chipko in Terry Garwal, Apiko in Karnataka, Save Girnar in Gujarat, Save Amazon in Latin America, women's fisherfolk struggle in Fiji Islands against nuclear testing in the Pacific Sea, and also Minamata struggle in Japan, where the fisher folks, they fought against a company called Minamata, which was releasing mercury pollution in the sea, which resulted in a carcinogenic and mutagenic effect. And so many of them, women, pregnant women, they delivered babies which were called jellyfish babies. These babies did not have limbs and legs. They had only the body part, no? And that was the effect of the mercury poisoning. Women can stop arbitrary felling of trees, and that is, and they have done it in several parts of the country. Chipko is a classic example. What is demanded is that respect collective wisdom of women. If women take firewood, they also plant trees. While commercial vested interests only exploit forest resources, and they are also making the lives of forest dwellers miserable. And this is not from now only, right from the colonial times, when the British rulers, for the first time, they saw such huge forests in their country. They had never had such thick forests, so they just went haywire, and they that was the time paper industry was also coming up, and British Empire, the East India Company, saw a major source of profiteering from the bamboo cultivation. There is a very good book written in 2 volumes, a very well-researched work done by Professor Manorama Sahur, which was supported by Indian Council of Social Science Research. She has gone into the history of bamboo cultivation in India, and to how and the new forest laws and the land acquisition laws which the British rulers came up with, they also dehumanized and brutalized forest dwellers in different parts of the country. Women are at the receiving end of the climate change. At the same time, they are also savior. Women often have unequal access to information and resources and are underrepresented in the decision-making bodies, which make them even more vulnerable to natural disasters and extreme weather events. We also saw during the pandemic also, 70% of the health workers were women. It is the right from doctors and scientists and pathologists and nurses and ASHA workers and Anganwadi workers, they all were women. But they were the ones who were who were never consulted. Their wisdom, whatever their knowledge at a ground level was never heard by the official agency. Though World Health Organization gave them award as a corona warrior, but the nation state, none of the state governments or the local self-government bodies, they went by their assessment of the situation. Despite women's vulnerabilities, women's knowledge and social practices could be used to build community resilience if women were included in adaptation and mitigation efforts. Women are seen as a victim of climate change. At the same time, what we see is that women also save Mother Earth. They save flora and fauna. So they are not only the victim of climate change, but they are also the savior of the natural resources that we have in our habitat. Involve women in the climate change debate is the motto, it is the slogan, it is the demand of the international women's movement. And in our country, women should have say in decision making concerning fuel, fodder, water, livestock raising and kitchen gardening, ensure women's land rights and fight against draconian land ceiling act. Male domination in discourse on climate change is also contested. The impacts of climate change on women are not a mainstream focus in key international agreements on climate change, such as Kyoto Protocol or United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. All key decision-making institutions related to climate change have a male-dominated hierarchical structure. Do gender audit of micro and macro planning and program implementation is another demand of the women's movement and women's studies scholars that provide platform to women farmers, community workers, students and youth concerning environmental issues. Document best practices, organize study tours, exposure programs to projects concerning climate change, and organize workshops on disaster management, which is very important. Now, Ministry of Home Affairs has started organizing workshop continuously over the last 2 years. Online workshops were organized in collaboration with various colleges regarding climate change, climate crisis, and resilience. Rejuvenation of agriculture is very important. Land to the tillers, protection of women farmers, priority to subsistence production, food and nutrition security, most important, and agrarian product prices, I think about which the Indian farmers had a long, nearly 18 months of struggle against the draconian farm laws, and also sustainable agriculture, so that the kind of crisis which Sri Lanka is facing currently because of the wrong macro policy, which completely banned use of chemical fertilizer, that can also prove disastrous. Indian experience is that Indian women are extremely vulnerable to climate change, as women are often responsible for providing daily essentials such as food and water. When climate-related disasters strike the poorest family, the workload of women and girls increases. They tend to miss out on opportunities. Studies have shown that Indian women born during drought or floods during 1970s, the whole decade, were 19% less likely to even attend the primary school, because so much of energy goes in collection of fuel, fodder, and water that you don't get, the girls are just not sent to school. As climate change intensifies, India's poorest women and girls are at the risk of losing opportunities to participate equally in development. At the same time, many poor women are involved in climate-sensitive activities such as paddy cultivation, fishing, and climate change also affects their livelihood in terms of creation of food insecurity and also depletion of resources. Facing a Changing World, Women, Population and Climate was released in 2009 by the United Nations, and it evolved, and I quote, "With the possibility of climate catastrophe on the horizon, we cannot afford to relegate world's 3.4 billion women and girls to the role of victim." United Nations Population Fund Chief Thuraya Ahmed Obeid said, "Wouldn't it make more sense to have 3.4 billion agents of change?" Now we can say that it should be around 4.5 billion agents of change, because now this was stated in the year 2009, and now in 2023 there are more women who are equipped on climate resilience. UNFPA study receives that United Nations Population Fund study reveals that the poorest population, while having contributed the least to climate change, are the most vulnerable to crisis. And I quote, "Our impending climate disaster is perhaps the most inequitable threat of our time," Richard Collot of UNFPA told journalists. Worst sufferers are women because they constitute major share of agriculture workforce, and also because they tend to have access to fewer income earning opportunities. They are totally dependent on subsistence agriculture. In Asian countries, if we see that 2.2 billion Asians rely on agriculture for their livelihoods, the statement said that a sector is now threatened by falling crop yields caused by floods, droughts, erratic rainfall, and other climate change impacts. Current climate models indicate food prices may increase sharply, rice prices by 29 to 37%, maize prices by 58 to 97%, and the wheat prices by 81 to 102%, more than double by 2050. Gender as a factor of vulnerability to climate change. When we see where it is estimated that women produce over 50% of food grown worldwide. Food and Agricultural Organization has declared that women are uh, the food sovereignty and the food security of this planet lies on the shoulder of women, because they are there into, men are into commercial crop while women are into subsistence crop in all the agriculture based economies, no, of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. In India, more than 84% women are involved in agriculture activities. As a result, they become the greatest victims of climate change's impact. And in addition, gender inequality makes them disproportionately vulnerable to environmental alterations, because anytime there is a scarcity, women are the least and leftover. They are the last one to eat. They eat leftover and they eat least, because if there is no food security. Climate threats to life in terms of, it's predicted that climate change will lead to increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather conditions. We are experiencing it in Bombay. It rained yesterday and day before yesterday. Imagine in the month of March, you get rains, precipitating the occurrence of natural disasters around the globe. London School of Economics study in 2007 examined natural disasters that had occurred in 141 countries from 1981 to 2002, and the study found that natural disasters lowers the life expectancy of women. As the disaster intensifies, so too does this effect on women in terms of malnutrition. Even the NFHS 5 study has shown that even at the time of pandemic, the malnutrition among women and children have increased. The morbidity rates have also gone up. During the disaster, women and children are 14 times more likely to die than men during natural disasters, and are otherwise disproportionately adversely affected. 85% of people who die from disasters are women. This is the data given by WeDo, a Women Environment and Development Organization. 70 to 80% of casualties in 2004's Asian tsunami were women. And 90% of casualties in 1991 cyclone in Bangladesh were women. 83% of low-income single mothers were displaced in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. They were the women-headed household, because women-headed households are the poorest of the poor. Even in the pyramid of poverty, this women-headed household, that means widow, single, divorced, and deserted women, they are at the bottom of the pyramid. And they live in the most hazardous slum areas. No? Increased workload and household burden, that is another feature of climate crisis. Because of women's role in household, women have had to cope up with swift environmental changes for centuries. However, climate change is lessening women's capacity to cope with these changes, and when women are not able to adapt to their environment, entire community suffers, because they are the ones who are provider of food, they are the ones who are caring for the sick, for the children, for elderly, for children, and the whole stability of the household, food supply and sanitation, and everything depends on women. Climate change exacerbates issues of scarcity, lack of accessibility to primary natural resources, forest resources, arable land, thereby contributing to increased workload and stresses on women and girls, as well as increased conflict and instability, which often leads to increased violence against women and girls. Women have limited ownership to resources. Women possess a unique capacity and knowledge to promote and provide for adaptation to and mitigation of climate change, but often have insufficient resources to undertake such initiatives. Women are constrained by lack of economic freedoms, property, inheritance rights, as well as access to financial resources, education, new tools, equipment, and technology. Women are underrepresented in development and formulation of policy and decision making regarding adaptation and the changes that are required, so suitable to the new reality. That is why the women's movement is demanding that prioritize livelihood issues in the agenda of action. Here you can see in this poster prepared by the women's group, which shows that we are a commercial plantation for industries takes place because cities need timber, furniture industry needs timber, okay, railways need timber. Big dams and for power generations are made. Indiscriminate mining takes place. Deforestation for development is a name of the game in any mega project. Thousands of people are dislocated and quote unquote rehabilitated for name's sake. Animal protection and human rejection, that is a policy of the state. Polluting factories and also packaging matters, not the product inside. You have the kind of packaging that we are doing, use of plastic and all of them are creating the disaster for the community. And women are asking, is this a development or a disaster? Where is my livelihood? So livelihood of women becomes a major concern in this whole discourse. Political inequality that we see that compounding this reality is the widespread gender inequities existing throughout policy and decision-making spheres, leaving women to struggle against restricted access to information and education, restricted mobility, and in many cases laws restricting and prohibiting land ownership. In our country, only 12% of women have a land ownership, and unless you own land, you are not entitled to any state support, right? From Kisan card, you are not even recognized as a farmer. When we talk about the agriculture agrarian household, we talk about farmer as a man. And who are the women in farmers' family? They are farmer's wife, farmer's mother, farmer's daughter, farmer's daughter-in-law. Okay, farmer, but we never call a woman a farmer. Though women are producing 60% of food in Asia, 80% of food in Africa, yet women have access to less than 1% of agricultural credit worldwide, because banks say, with the financial institutions, whether they are private financial institution or the nationalized banks, none of them give women any kind of a credit. They are not even listed as a credit worthy because they have no collateral. Unless you own anything, without asset ownership, no financial institution will give. So where are the women's representation in agenda setting power? No. In Uganda, women say that we travel further and further for firewood every year, and it takes us to less safe places. So again, the question of violence against women, the sexual violence, kidnapping, trafficking, police brutality they have to face. Deforestation in Uganda amplifies already dire condition. Local women's group addresses this problem by planting evergreen and mango trees to replace ones cut down for fuel, and charcoal, reducing erosion and helping people earn living. Martina Lungam is a strong advocate for role of education that education can play in fighting against climate change. We also see that this lively earth, the blogger Priscilla Stuckey, she said that discrimination against women also plays an enormous role in how women experience effects of climate change. In India, for example, where women have seen their crop yields cut in half and quality of grain diminish because of climate changes, women's health is impaired from double whammy of inferior crops and the inequality of distribution of family resources. As I told you, women eat last, least, and leftover. Acute survival struggle which climate change creates, and it has made the search for livelihoods tougher, created greater food insecurity, caused sharp decline in quality of life, and triggered mass migration. Human Development Report also highlighted micro-level studies which had revealed that Indian women born during floods in the 70s were 19% less likely to have attended primary school. So clearly the vagaries of climate change have potential to make life a high-risk venture for those whose capacity to manage this risk in terms of both personal choice as well as personal income is minimal, because they don't have agenda setting power. They have to take whatever is dumbed down in their life. Lessons of Chipko and Apiko, that when women from Rainy village in Chamoli district who took to forest mafia through the Chipko movement in the mid-70s, and the Bhil tribal women in Madhya Pradesh's Sondwa block who are today patrolling their forests to defeat the design of those intent on denuding them. With able-bodied men searching for livelihood opportunities in the cities, more women than ever are left to do low-paying agricultural jobs, including activities earlier prohibited to them, like plowing. Now you see in so many, even in UP and some of the most uh, mm, traditional societies, we see women are plowing because there are no men. Testimonies in the public hearing. The environmental organizations are organizing public hearing about the issues regarding climate change, environmental disasters, and the livelihood struggles. So Gauri Bai belongs to a small hamlet in Bundelkhand. Being a part of farming community, her life and livelihood depend on agriculture. But changing weather and decreasing water from irrigation are threatening her survival. The vagaries of nature have left her steeped in debt and poverty. Shyamli Das from Sundarbans in West Bengal has been witness to many cyclones that have struck the area in recent times. Cyclonic storms flooded vast tracts of farmland, which remained inundated for a long time. As a member of fishing community, she has suffered losses of 20 fish species. And she says that accept us and our knowledge as a base to adapt and mitigate climate change. That is what women from Sundarban are demanding. Global, now everything is not so bleak. There have been very important success stories that we had. Wangari Maathai, winner of 2004 Nobel Peace Prize, successfully implemented Green Belt movement in Kenya, one of the leading worldwide climate change projects. Wangari Maathai is a professor of botany who challenged the agrarian commercialized agriculture and the agro-business. And they said that hunger in Africa was not created by Africans. Okay, Africa doesn't have a problem of population. They have a vast pool of land. They were happy with their traditional diet of makkah, maize, corn, and it was the agro-business which took over thousands of acres of land and forced the farmers and lured them into commercial agriculture and cultivation of coffee, cocoa, pineapple, strawberry, and other fruits which were required by the for the consumption of the markets in Western world, America, Canada, and Europe. It was this agro-business that they messed up with the food security of Africa. For saying that, she was dubbed as a mad woman and she was imprisoned. It was only when we all went to Nairobi conference, in the end of the decade conference in 1985, first thing we said that release Wangari Maathai. The conference was in Nairobi. Wangari was a professor of botany in Nairobi. She had started Green Belt movement. She had started traveling in 56 African countries and to convince the farmers that don't get lured by agro-business. Food security is most important. You can't allow your family members to starve just to cultivate coffee and cocoa and strawberry and pineapple and lychees, no? Shahina Begum spearheads community effort in her village in Bangladesh and focuses on preparing women for disasters, giving them tools and basic skills to survive and prepare for floods and cyclones that frequent her village, that are getting increasingly worse and more unpredictable. Women are pivotal to the efforts to control erosion due to land degradation in rural community and Senegal under the framework of agrobio NIAS program by ENDA ProNet. And women are also involved in building vegetation for science, infiltration ditches, open trenches to slow water speed. This has not only helped to save agriculture, but also reduce time women spend getting water. Women have been able to trade herbal plants. Adaptation program like this that specifically target and involve women, allow women to develop capacity as well as increase capacity of the communities these women support. That is why, once again, respect collective wisdom of women. So aggregating the local knowledge and recent breakthroughs in agriculture and environmental research and development, and using insights to gain for better management of natural resources. The sharing of information as efficiently as possible emerges as an urgent and pressing requirement. And I think these also we experienced during two years of lockdown. The sharing of information was so important. Now we have also so many social media portals. They also connect us so fast. It was in the form of advanced bulletin on weather patterns or timely data on market trends. Inputs from gender theorists. One is that women and men have differential vulnerabilities. So these are the theorization which the women studies scholars and the gender experts have done. Disaster is not an equalizer. You know, when in the first month of corona pandemic, they all said corona doesn't differentiate between man and women. But the social location of men and women very different. So it is not an equalizer. Tsunami disaster mortality, women were not taught survival skill of swimming. So most of them drowned. Even their reproductive health was compromised. This is what the TISS study of 2008 is shown, where the social workers were doing the relief operations and also participatory action research on impact of tsunami. Trafficking, bonded labor, sexual assault, forced marriages take place every time there is a disaster, whether it is an earthquake or floods or women getting separated due to a cyclone, whatever. Any kind of disaster results in this kind of tragedies for women. Amplification of gender-based violence in a post-disaster situation. We have seen that because women are locked with the abuser, those who save them, they only abuse them. That's what tsunami experience showed. Even at the time of pandemic also, the lockdown, women could not run away from their abuser. Economic exclusion is a marked feature of disaster. Relief material, which is gender blind. Earthquake, when it happens, women are indoor. Most of the women were indoor at the time of earthquake in Latur, earthquake in Kutch. So women died and they got buried. Men were outside, women were inside. Access to early warning information of climate change, men get it very easily, women are left out. Voice of women and gender minorities is very important to bring center stage in this situation. Beyond coping, we need to think about the resilience building. It is not only when the disaster takes place, what can we do, but how do we prevent such disasters? How do we prepare ourselves from, you must have seen the videos of when the earthquake in Japan happened. Within 24 hours, they could control the situation. They have seen major disasters like bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Second World War. So Japan has come up with so many important intervention strategies and the strategic needs of the people at the time of disaster. I think we need to come up with that. So whenever any disaster takes place, our motto should be build back better. That's what we are saying, that even after the pandemic, we want to build back better. Sita Devi, a farmer, she said that in a blog called Find Your Feet, and I quote, when there is no rain, we women have to work really hard in the fields to try and grow crops. Our nutrition also suffers because we are the last to eat in the family table. A lot of us are anemic as a result. Women have to walk long distances for potable water, fodder becomes scarce, and fuel wood also can be curtailed. Increased burden of caregiving. As a primary caregiver, women may see their responsibilities increase as family members suffer. Women are expected to create a familial environment in the challenging time, soothing touch that women are expected to provide. Increased illness due to exposure to vector-borne diseases such as malaria, waterborne diseases such as cholera. Increase in heart stress mortality and stressful life, and also increased malnutrition that they have to face. Women farmers' response to the corporate world. Women farmers organization. We have an organization in our country called MAKAM, Mahila Kisar Adhikar Manch. MAKAM is active in 18 states of our country. What do they say? MAKAM's policy and MAKAM's understanding and the worldview is that food is a human right, not a corporate commodity for speculation. Mother Nature doesn't operate on a boardroom profits. corporate profit will merely lead to more food crisis. In response to COVID-19 pandemic, women leaders of 18 countries opted for the policies. What did they say? People before profit. That's very important. We need to remember. Indian women with this kind of perspective, even with the limited resources, have come up with an excellent result. In Jehanabad, Dalit women forming the lowest rung of the India stratified society now demonstrate adaptation to climate change by following a system of interspersing crops that do not need extra water, chemical inputs, or pesticides for production. They grow 19 types of indigenous crops to an acre on arid, degraded lands that they have been regenerated. A collective of 5,000 women spread across 75 villages in this arid interior part of southern India is now offering chemical-free, non-irrigated, organic agriculture as one method of combating global warming. In the Pacific Island, as I told you, that the women have played a very important role. Climate conditions and extreme events such as droughts, floods, sea level rise, coastal erosion, rising temperature, they have created massive volatility in the Pacific Islanders, and women are bearing the brunt of impact of this kind of changes, and the responsibility of communities' food security as well as well-being is with women, and that's why women are at the forefront of the struggle. Now everyone is talking about vast renewable energy potential. It could help in responding to the scenario provided policy and financial measures quickly scale up proven technologies for the poor, including small hydro and smaller powers, or small solar powers. Rainwater harvesting now even in the urban areas. Now we are talking about the urban forest. Government of India has come up with the urban forest policy. Delhi is the city with the highest number of urban forests, but elsewhere also it is being promoted. Decentralized water bodies are now name of the game. Recycling and reusing. Bhugyan is a portal which talks about, which provides an integrated knowledge system on climate change. The South Asian countries, all 9 South Asian countries are contributing their knowledge sources in Bhugyan. In the crucial sustainable discourse concerns, the crucial aspects are recognition of structural flaws of current development model, human rights-based approach, gender justice, social protection for disadvantaged section, links between employment and environment, because so many times it happens that the workers who are working in environmentally disastrous projects, they are up in arm against the environmental group. So that we should see to it that the workers' livelihood and the environmental concerns, they both are looked after whenever any policy or any program is implemented. Social sustainability, economic sustainability, appropriate technology, the policy of reduce, reuse, recycle, and also junk is good. That is the slogan which Sweden has given. Sweden is the highest importer of the junk from the world, because they have developed technology to process the junk and make it into usable goods. Genuine Progress Index, that is a new index which is developed, which goes beyond the conventional growth parameter, and which takes the environmental sustainability as a major parameter. Here we see that women who are working in the field, women who are in the forest, and women who are fighting for their livelihoods, how do they struggle for their survival. Recently, we have seen that some governments have come up with a very strong and clear-cut policy of promotion of cleaner forms of energy, shift to energy efficient system to conserve energy, and reduction and climate proofing of the community by involving women. In fact, Maharashtra got the first prize from the UN for the very exhaustive study it did in collaboration with Terry, and came up with the action agenda. We have also seen that 40 cities in the state were also selected for climate intervention. And what we see is that integration of climate justice with the society, economy and ecology. They are very important. And here Gandhiji's statement that world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed becomes extremely important to remember. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important subject on this important day of International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam, for such an engaging and thoughtful deliberation. The intersectional approach on gender and climate change is so worth listening and worth learning. We know so much. We knew so much about your deliberations on the variety aspects of the different vagaries of climate change, and raised such a pertinent question that this climate change is not just a mere abstract ecological question, but something that is related to the lives and livelihoods of women per se. Now, without furthering on, I would open the floor for question answers. I'm sure our respected audience and dear students will have lots of questions in their minds, and their valued comments will add on to our session.
Thank you, madam. I don't have any question. I just want to thank you for this excellent talk. I have heard from the beginning, and this is really a wonderful talk. I don't have any question. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam. We already have some questions popping up in the chat box. So the first question is sent by Saurya Visya from Catalyst Learning Services. The question posted here is on, if you can, I'm just reading out the question. If you can kindly highlight the role of men and boys in enabling equity to our social system. Being a mentor,
I think most.
I guess he has just asked a bit. May I, madam, continue with the question?
Yeah, please go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Being a mentor to motivate students and working professionals to pursue career in the social sector over last 12 years, we find a small percentage of male students participating in campaigns for women or pursuing women's studies or gender studies. This is the question, ma'am.
Yeah, I think we have to, because now I think the new national education policy talks about gender sensitization right from the pre-primary level, no? So that is very important. I think 10 years down the line, we will see the change. But I think it's very important that men take active part. Like in our part, it was in the 80s when women's movement became very militant and robust, and men also started organizations called Purushovacha. It was a weekly study circle in which they invited feminists and the women's rights activists. And we have a Man Against Violence and Abuse, MAVA, which is very much in demand, and so many qualified students from social work, social sciences, even the engineers, doctors, theater artists, actors, actresses, all of them work in collaboration with MAVA, and they organize film festivals, public debates, discussion. They also take out their journal in both English as well as in Marathi, Purush Spandan. So I think these efforts they need to replicate, and I think we need to amplify their voices and consider that it is a question of half of the population, no? Because when the UN made Universal Declaration of Man after 2 world wars, it was a person like Hansaben Mehta and Advocate Mann who told the United Nations General Assembly that what kind of declaration you are talking of when 50% of world's population is left out. And then after this kind of a shock therapy, that UN realized that they needed to do major rework on the Universal Declaration of Man, and finally the committee was formed, and now what we have is a UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I think mange bina maa bhi nahi deti. Even your mother doesn't give you anything without having to ask for it. So now we have to pull this man. And I think I see after 2013, after the Nirbhaya tragedy, I think increase in number of young boys, they are the ones who invite, because there was a time where people used to say in the 21st century that feminists have become dinosaurs. We are not needed. And suddenly we were discovered by these young boys, and they could think of only two solutions: castration and chemical castration, and capital punishment, which is not the solution. If we do this thing, then half of the men will be in jail, no? So main thing is to change the misogynist mindset, and nobody is born misogynist. Okay, माँ के पेट से कोई सीख के नहीं आता. Nobody from your mother's womb, you don't learn that. And you are innocent. Like you, even all those women who supported Bhavri Devi after she was gang raped, and it was a very painful struggle from 93 to 97 till the Justice Verma Committee came up with the Vishaka Directive. And all those five women, this Mahila Samu, that group of women who were with Bhavri Devi, who were fighting against giant forces, there was a tremendous burnout. They decided to go to Himalayas. They took their sleeping bags, and for 6 weeks they were just climbing various rocks of Himalayas. And they said not once they heard bad language. They did not hear a single bad word against women. The weather was harsh. Sometimes there was a cyclone, there was a very, very cold wind. They did not have food. Sometimes they had to do only with the tea. That too is with the watery tea, no milk. But people were very well behaved. They were very civil. They did not come across any incidents of beating women or raping women or kidnapping or ill treatment. That means what we have learned, this behavior is a learned behavior. And we can unlearn it. One thing good about gender, if it is socially constructed, you can also change it. No? So I think that effort, person like you will have to take initiative, and we all will join you. No, we need more and more Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and we need Jyotiba Phule, and we need all those 19th century social reformer men who really paid a very, very great price for bringing these changes, which that we all enjoy. No. Right to education, and right to higher education, and working, right to work, and the very progressive constitution that our country has. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Someone has raised a hand. Will you please unmute yourself and put your question, please? If you want to directly ask our respected speaker any question, kindly, you can also unmute yourself and raise your question. Okay. Yes, our chat box is filled up with all praises with you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Everyone is awestruck with this really intersectional approach to gender and just climate change. You have so rightly pointed out that climate change is not just it's not an abstract generalized concept. It is somehow related to the everyday realities, to the survival, to the food securities of women, right from the hinterland of Sundarban to the Green Belt movement of Nairobi, to the Uganda, to the Minnesota cases. You have just showed such a layered way, in such a layered presentation. You have showed us that how climate change is our everyday. It is not just about the marginalized women. It is something that is affecting us as well. So we can't actually do away with this. And especially in my very limited way, I just want to raise one thing, that how the disasters, the relief that comes after disasters, the disaster management team, they also become so gender blind that, distribution of sanitary pads, this gender felt needs never come up to their mind. So this is so awesome. We never think about these things, and these are the everyday realities of women. These are left unseen, and their voices are really left unheard in the wider discourse of welfare strategies. So this is so worth learning. Any more questions? We are now slowly edging towards the end of this very wonderful deliberation, very enticing, thought-provoking, and engaging deliberation. Now, may I request Professor Sanjukta Das to kindly deliver the vote of thanks, please. Over to Professor.
Thank you, Malini. Profound thanks from the Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, to Professor Vibhuti Patel. This was a topic that we were all looking forward to, and there's so much we have learned, so much we have learned. Thank you so much, Madam. Thank you very much, Professor Shuli Sarkar, Principal of Lady Brabourne College, who always takes a very, very proactive interest in all the programs and has given guidance and support all through. Thanks to the conveners of the Women's Studies Center, Lady Brabourne College, Dr. Parna Ghosh and Dr. Mohua Roy, for steering this Women's Studies Center towards success in all its programs. Thank you very much, office bearers, Shomasri and Shulobna, for all the hard work behind the scenes. Thank you very much, Mona Lisa Jha and Malini, for the work today. And thanks to all the other members of the Women's Studies Center. Thanks to all our dear students who have joined. And thanks to Arvind Database, who has given technical support for this. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.